Hello, everybody. I'm Anna Woldrich from the Austrian Academy of Sciences in Vienna. Happy to have you here. I'd like to point out to you as well that we have a Twitter discussion going on under the hashtag Ignite Roundtable. You can follow our discussion on Twitter as well. You can submit your questions there, or you can submit your questions here in the questions and answers feature. We will answer questions after each talk. So enough of me. I'd like to introduce our moderator for this session, which is Marianne Huang. She's an associate professor, academic developer at Aarhus University. Hi, Marianne.
Hello, Anna. Thank you. Hello, everybody. And welcome to our second Ignite Digital Roundtable on design thinking and maker culture and how we may make pathways for sticky learning for the 21st century. The Ignite Roundtables will be held on Wednesday afternoons through April, and we will explore digital technologies and new methods of teaching to promote what we call sticky learning, that is learning that is retained and will create a societal impact well after it is taught. For today's roundtable, we have 4 brilliant speakers to share with us. And we also, from these 3 speakers, we have, from these 4 speakers, we have 3 speakers from the Ignite project, which will give us an opportunity also to discuss that and to have feedback from you all. So today we are going to hear from Jasmina Maric from the University of Borås in Sweden, from Susan Schreibman from Maastricht University from the Netherlands, from Guido Stompff from Inholland University of Applied Sciences, also the Netherlands, and from Rikke Toft Nørgaard from Aarhus University, Denmark. And you may pose questions for all our speakers, either in the chat or in the Q&A application at the bottom bar. And we will have a short round of questions after each talk. After the talks, we will conclude with a question and answer dialogue between the panelists and with you, our audience. Again, put questions and comments in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll select amongst these for our discussion. And now I'll give the screen or the space, the room, to Jasmina Maric from Borås, who's going to speak to us about teaching for 20th century skills at Web Content Manager and Designer program at the University of Borås. Please, Jasmina.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Jasmina Maric, and I don't know, I can start my video. Hello, nice to see you all here. And as Marianne said, I'm teaching at the University of Borås in the field of visual communication to web content and management design people. So if you don't mind, shall I start my presentation now? Yeah. Well, I'm going to start with sharing my screen and show you what I have prepared for you today. So this is a PowerPoint presentation that somehow is going through the paper I have wrote on teaching for 21st century. Starting from the idea that we should better know what kind of language and usage we should be using for our students, you know, so what kind of learning they need for the 21st century. You know, I started digging a little bit deeper and what we are doing, you know, in our education. So this is a study that is based on another pre-study run in 2016, and this is recently based on something new we have done this year. So I propose a model 5 E's for 4 C's. And what is that about? The question is, how can we improve students' 21st century skills acquisition through our teaching? And to be able to answer to that question, what is the relevant knowledge in the 21st century, I started looking at a question of what are 21st century skills. So in this talk, first, I suggest that learning can be relevant and effective. It can be actually also a plausible activity. But let's start first looking at 21st century skills. So this is my experiment. I have to move this bar down. Yeah, that's gonna be, this is easier. Yeah, so what are the 21st century skills? And up to what extent what we do today at our universities is actually catering for 21st century skills? I come from many years of experience in the web development and design industry, and then I came to academic environment. And for me, all this academic knowledge and this constant stress, how academic we are, you know, was actually making a lot of problems, what at the end our students take, you know, into their future. So therefore, I did the research on understanding what is 21st century learning. And to make everything very short in this 10-minute presentation, I summed up everything on this one slide. So basically, if you go through all these papers and research that are published, let's say in last 10-ish, 5 years, it is generally across different frameworks agreed that collaboration, communication, digital literacy, citizenship, problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, and productivity are essential for living and contributing to our present society. So it's a long list, you know, so I had to put everything here. And in the recent publications, you can find talking about 4 C's. So I'm looking here for a model, I'm proposing a model that would actually cater for these 4 super skills for 21st century, and that's creativity, communication, critical thinking, and collaboration. And then in this very fine paper, I found this very good visualization and organization of all our synthesis of 15 different 21st century learning frameworks. So there are many papers and there are many discussions in the field, you know, what actually we need. And as you can see, you know, on this visualization, these treats are organized in foundational knowledge, humanistic knowledge, and meta-knowledge. So here we have cross-disciplinary knowledge, core content knowledge, digital literacy as foundational knowledge. And then Karelia proposes humanistic knowledge and meta-knowledge, where humanistic knowledge are life job skills, ethical emotional awareness, cultural competence, and meta-knowledge to act, how we act actually in society is creativity, innovation, problem solving, and critical thinking, and communication and collaboration. Starting with this model, we run research in 2016 with our students in our program to understand what we do and how we teach, how this actually caters for 21st century skills. And on the left-hand side, you see the results of 6 problems faced by students that are distributed across Karelic model. So I'm not going to go deeper in this, but I mean, basically what we realize when we transfer the results from this table into the visualization, this is how missing skill analysis looks like. So basically, it looks like we cut across this visualization along this orange line, and everything on right-hand side is missing. This cross-disciplinary knowledge, cultural competence, communication, collaboration, problem solving and critical thinking, and creativity, innovation. Even though we all the time argue, and our course syllabus is saying that we are aiming for creativity and critical thinking and communication and so on. So thinking about that, how we could change the content and everything we do, how we could raise, you know, and make this better, how we could cover better this circle, I asked myself a question, you know, is there any model that we could use, and what would be the best way to deliver teaching that would create this sticky learning effect and keep our students, you know, more relaxed and how to say, in the mood to love their education. You know, I was thinking about, can we create an environment where everybody are going to love to explore what they're doing? So I started with Brunner's 5 E's, thinking about engagement, exploration, explanation, elaboration, and evaluation. And we have created a new course where assignments mirror real-life user experience development environment to be able to cater for 21st century skills. So after a long preparation of the course and many people cooperating in the course, we ran research with our students and asked them what they think about the course. They had 5 different assignments, starting from a project plan and then iterative development in 3 different iterations. They were cooperating in groups, giving feedback, presenting each other, playing role plays with each other, having a role, for example, representing the results to some kind of CEO in the company and then trying to argue why a solution is good or bad, going back to the solution, iterate again, and so on until they would develop their solution for a specific user. So they had the task to choose between different users, namely retired people in a retirement home that would like to invest their retirement in cybercoins, or for example, 12-year-old students from 6th grade in elementary schools that would like to know more about climate change, or another group of IT engineers, you know, willing to know more about IT, about climate change. So, I mean, they were designing specific software solution that you could interact with on your screen for the specific user through 3 different iterations. And finally, you know, after finishing all these assignments, we have asked students, you know, how everything we created in the course catered for 21st century learning. We used this Corellic model to ask them questions, and they were expressing, you know, how they feel about it, you know, in the surveys. We did a qualitative and quantitative survey using Likert scale, and here is a median of it. And we can say that the model actually gave a very good results, because actually everything that was cut before in the old version of the course with the new version was covered. Students reported that this kind of learning actually increased all of these notions of learning, except one, and that was cultural competence. We have not identified a lot of change here in the cultural competence, even though in the course, this is international course, but we had, let's say, about 40 people from Sweden and maybe only 5 people from Germany. So it was not enough international, you know, because it was a first course run. So, here you can see something from the qualitative analysis when we did the interview with the students, and we asked them to express what they think about the course and up to what extent this gives them, you know, good preparation for their professional future and in general, you know, future of as the citizens of the 21st century. So, as you can see, words like learn, work, know. Yeah, I forgot that they were using React. This is why they were programming by using React. This is why React is standing in center of it. But I would say that learn and think and know really, is shining through this visualization. So I think that's all I have to say now in order to present what we did. Yeah, thank you. I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, you didn't. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a great presentation and thought-provoking, great experiment on curriculum development. I'm just looking for questions from our audience.
Yeah.
Do we have anything in the Q&A? No. Otherwise, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that it's on the backdrop of one of the talks from our first roundtable, which was a talk also about how to onboard students into a new learning paradigm. So your students, after having gone through the course and with all the experiences of like empowerment, did they find it, do you think, hard to onboard, or was this something they had been longing for and actually been prepared for from before the course?
Well, they were not really prepared. Well, in a way, the whole challenge came, from my attempt to put their whole education into some kind of contest for the future, and how you help someone to be this lifelong learner. And I went for inquiry-based learning, and I wanted to introduce them to problematics that is realistic. So not only in academic terms that you have to read and write, but also to go and talk to users and really experience real life environment. And that gave a very good results, because we got a lot of positive feedback saying that now, after going through that course, they really were able to connect why they learned everything before. This is last course on a third year, before they're going to finish their education. They're just about to write a final paper, but they got a feeling that they got a very good wrap up, and they said, well, now I understand what we did, and it was put in some context that is going to stay, I think. And thanks to that, and thanks to the fact that we were using React, almost, I don't know, like 10% already got job interviews because of that. And, one of them before finishing the education already got a job, and so on. So I think that kind of thinking could actually help everybody, us in academia, to say, why we are doing and what we are using, but also to get this very positive feedback. They really liked it. Another thing was, because we use a lot of online learning. So one group is working online and the other group is in campus. It was really interesting to see the change of energy, both online and offline, that people are so engaged in this, because it was not only creativity, but meeting real life problems and trying to address gave another, ignition to this. And I really think that I would like to pursue this model more, and to see, how sticky it is, how long it's going to stick.
Yeah. And actually, I think we should find room for at least one more question, and then save whatever for afterwards. But there is a question which relates very much to your answering my question. It's a question from Sarah, and she says that she's interested in your perspective on whether you think that something, sort of the skills that you embedded in your course should be addressed during high school. before entering universities? And I could add sort of the question, do you think that it is actually addressed also in high school?
Well, I mean, that's a quite, how to say, I mean, complex question. We did one project with, how to say, students of high schools when they were cooperating with the Opera House in Gothenburg, and where opera wanted to reach out to young people because, you know, this traditional problem with their audience. They wanted young people to get better in contact with dance company and to give them a knowledge about contemporary dance. And in collaboration with us, we were embedding new media to give young participants the voice to tell us about the whole process. And in this process, where again, you know, we used this experience and critical thinking in their hands and technology that they use every day, we got a very good results. And actually, we raised the bar of the project on a level that we were not expecting, you know, and we got a very, very positive feedback. So I think that the model is possible to be used across different disciplines and different institutions even. This is where I think that this is a real capacity, you know, this to make this more sustainable, you know, and even more creative. Yeah. So through this, you know, they got through one very creative process. Everybody were really energized, and completely on the other plane, they learned a lot about digital storytelling and, you know, intercultural communication and so on. So it doesn't have to be explicitly sitting in the classroom and learning. It can be, you know, served in another way and really become plausible.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I'll say thank you now. You actually have a few more questions, but maybe we can return to those, or you could answer them in writing if you want to. Thank you so much, Jasmina. I think this was a really a very good start for our session today. So now I would like to invite Susan Schreibman from Maastricht University in the Netherlands to actually to talk to us about the IGNITE curriculum on design thinking and maker culture, and how the digital humanities meet the creative industries. Please, Susan.
Thank you very much, Marianne. I'll just share my screen as well. Okay, so thank you very much. And Jasmina, your talk really segues really nicely into what we're doing and what I'm going to talk about in IGNITE. And I just want to say that I am presenting this on behalf of our, and I'll use this word, core IGNITE team, because we have many other people who are participating on the project. So this is very much a group effort, and many of us are on this call today. So the virtual conference is in fact hosted by IGNITE. We were going to meet in Vienna last month, and that did not work out. So we went online. So IGNITE's a 3-year project. It's coming to a close in July 2020, and it's funded by Creative Europe Media. And the goal of the project is to develop a core curriculum for both upskilling professionals in the creative and cultural industries, and to prepare MA students technologically, theoretically, and methodologically for new digitally inflected careers in the arts and humanities. And it draws together several shifts, and Jasmina, what you said earlier really ties into this, in education and policy and research, through a range of creative problem-solving techniques focused on, in our case, the twin theories of design thinking and maker culture. So as with the other courses on Daria Teach, where these courses are going to live, we envision the courses to be used in a variety of learning and teaching. It could be used as part of a face-to-face class, blended learning, training. It could be totally online. And as it happens, we have some colleagues who are now teaching around 250 students on one of the existing Daria Teach courses, Digital Scholarly Editions, and its developers sent out a word to run it like a MOOC. So there's 250 people, they're following the content online, and they have a weekly Zoom session. So this is the curriculum as we've designed it, and we are designing it. We've designed it as a 20 ECTS course. If one were to teach it or take it its entirety, we imagine that the first 2 courses would be mandatory, and the other 4 you would take an optional 2. Of course, you could do all 30 if you wanted to, or you could just take or utilize in your teaching just one of these. Each of them are self-contained. So if you do one of these courses, you really don't need the others, although we do refer back and forth to take it. So the first 2 courses, what we say are the mandatory courses, are introducing theoretical, practical tools, method, resources to integrate both design thinking and maker culture into one's research or teaching practice. We make the case for maker culture as a distinctly humanities practice, as a way to expose past wrongs, to develop social justice initiatives, to participate as an equal partner with other disciplines in helping to solve society's grand challenges. And as our present moment has demonstrated just how essential to life and well-being the arts and the humanities are, this design, thinking, and maker set of courses, suite of courses, provides a variety of case studies in our field, our extended field in the arts, humanities, heritage, of people who have just done this. And my colleague Guido will be speaking, I think after me, about the second course, how to practice design thinking. So of the optional courses, we have 2 others. One is to explore 3D and XR technologies and how to practice these in the arts, humanities, and heritage. Remaking Material Culture in 3D introduces a step-by-step guide to create 3D artifacts using photogrammetry. It's a technique that can be used by anybody with a camera. Even you could do it at home with a mobile camera, mobile phone camera. XR utilizes new technologies in settings from museums to natural spaces to explore, expose, and interrogate heritage and history. The 2 last optional courses, one is Storytelling for Digital Narratives, and this takes a very expansive approach to narrative. It's interactive, it's multimodal, it's digital, it's in virtual and in physical spaces. And Gameplay Design, which my colleague Ricky will present also today, explores the use of game jams, game design within the wider field of game studies. So, if you're interested, you can go to Daria Teach, the URL here. The courses are going to be made available over the coming months. And we already have about a dozen courses there from a previous grant. All the courses are designed for asynchronous use and they're all freely available. And we're always looking for collaborators for Daria Teach. So if you'd like to develop a new course for the platform, if you want to translate an existing course, please get in touch with us. And we're very excited because yesterday we just launched 3 translated courses in Spanish, which we will be promoting very soon. So as our present situation is made patently evident, digital divides are about access and capability. They are about inclusion and exclusion in the ways we approach our digital commons and the distribution of power, knowledge, and agency. In the Ignite Daria Teach design philosophy, we address the 3rd level divide, which may no longer be as much about access to technology, but it is about the ways that technology-driven approaches are conceptualized and implemented. It's also about how design forms an integral part of managing projects and creating resources. Interestingly, those of us in the traditional humanities, as well as our colleagues in heritage, are and increasingly are designers. We're people who create tangible and intangible objects, products, or processes. And we are increasingly conscious that the design of these objects and the collections we create embed within them their theoretical underpinnings. So what we're advocating in Ignite, as Brudik and her co-authors do on this slide, is that as humanities researchers, we become more conscious of how design can be used as a rhetorical device. When we talk about integrating design into our digital scholarship, it's not simply at certain points in the project workflow, but to think of design as informing each stage of the research process as an intellectual method. So design thinking combines what's desirable from a human point of view with what's technology feasible and economically viable. And it provides a framework for what we'll call an empathetic understanding of people and the issues underlying problems, as well as ideas of ideation, prototyping, and testing. But as we mentioned earlier, maker culture is the second underlying principle of the Ignite curriculum. And it takes the position that the process is as important as the product, and that artifacts can embed within them theoretical positions as forcefully as what we expect from traditional text-based arguments. So maker culture sees things as possessing intentionality, in embedding within them the historical moment of their creation, in the novelty or utilitarianness of their design, and in the embodiment of a theory informing making, what Marc Ratto calls a mode of material and conceptual engagement that brings together two seemingly opposite concepts, critical thinking and making, while enabling creativity and reflection. So the underlying pedagogic approach to Ignite is problem and project-based learning, responding to an increasingly competitive economy and society that requires an agile, adaptable, and creative workforce, which also resonates really well with Jasmina's paper. And one which in the future, as well as our foreseeable present, may be increasingly lived online. So, to conclude, the Ignite suite of courses advocates new literacies crucial for 21st century education and work. It's about creativity, about illiteracy within digital, increasingly networked societies, in which careers are no longer thought of as linear progressions through an organization, but for better or worse, precarious and more mobile. We know the technical skills we teach and we learn today, they're not necessarily going to be the ones that are used in 5, 10, or 20 years. So our approach that's underpinning all these courses is that we think about technology not as just as a set of skills that you have to master, but to foster a creative approach to new technologies, not only today's, but those that are yet to be invented. So that's me done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susan. It was an awesome presentation, and I think we are sort of the part of the team that is present here. We are really excited to be part of this. I have a question from Sarah, who says, awesome work and ideas, Susan. I want to know more about your approach. How did you go about creating the sessions? I have a human-computer interaction qualitative ethnographic fieldwork background, so I'm often more interested in the process of creating.
So at this point, I don't have to be the only one that answers because much of the team is here and can also answer those questions. How did we go about creating the courses? I mean, one of the things that we felt strongly about, because quite a few of us come from a digital humanities background, was that we wanted to elevate making as equal to thinking or theory or writing. And so a basic principle and something we advocate and show a lot, particularly in the first course that Marianne and I did a lot of work on, or also our colleague Kostas Papadopoulos, was to show how people making make a difference in society. And so that is one of the underlying principles that we charge our students, readers, whatever we want to call them, to maybe, as it were, rise to this occasion and think of the work that we do in the humanities and heritage as being equally important as anybody in computer science, engineering, etc. I don't know, Marianne, if you want to add.
Yeah, I could add that that it is also a process of co-creating, that we are working together. We are actually working together on this entire curriculum, but also on the individual parts of it. And I think also we should mention that we've tested this. That goes for Susan and Kostas, for me and for Vicky also, that we have tested this with students and with also with case partners beyond campus to see, does this make sense? We get feedback, and we have an uptake of that feedback. So we are trying to walk the talk, and at least to me, I think this maker approach, which Susan connects so much to the humanities, kind of reopened. We had this discussion at some point recently. Susan kind of reopened the humanities to me, sort of from the material point of view, that doing an analysis of an object, an artifact, has this kind of new material perspective that I think gives a lot to working in this way as well. So it's not just about sort of new digital creations. It's actually also about connecting the digital and the material into a kind of new materialism.
And I just see that Sarah made a little more specific her question, and the answer is yes. Marianne talked about the co-creation, but we both teach, and as I'll include my colleague Kostas as well, because we teach in the same program at Maastricht University, that we have students from many different disciplines, many different countries, and so we were able to test some of the content with them, and we have made quite significant changes as a result of that. I think the question from Martijn might be good for maybe the end, because it relates quite to many of the presentations.
Yeah. And I think actually this is also a very good point to say thank you again, Susan, and you will be with us. We'll talk again and say welcome to Guido Stompff from the Inholland University of Applied Sciences, who is actually going to unpack our course number 2 on design thinking and making and the practice of it. Welcome, Guido.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone, because I'm a new face probably for most of you. I'm going to share my screen as well. Is that okay? And I hope you can see what I'm seeing right now. Yes, just give me a thumbs up because I can't see any notes right now. Is Marianne? Yes, thank you very much. What I like to let's start with saying who I am. I'm a professor from Inholland University of Applied Sciences, which is in the Netherlands a little bit different than the regular universities. It's more like a Fachhochschule in Germany. And indeed, I'm responsible together with Sabine, who's a designer, and Jean van Bertrans from Cube Museum. And sorry, Jean, I missed an R in your name. Sorry for that. And myself, we are working on course number 2 on how to practice design thinking. And I named this presentation Reframing Design Thinking because in a way, what I learned, I'm a professor of design thinking, is that especially scientists, when they, how do you say, frame what design thinking is, what maker's culture is, in a way stick to a paradigm which is already existent in science, but is conflicting with the paradigm that is underneath design and design thinking. So what I like to share with you today is what we made, what we are making in course unit 2, and how we integrated it within the larger courses that we're making. But, and here's the but that I like to add, is we deliberately are adding something which is more in line with the paradigm of maker and design thinking. Now, what I will do in this presentation is 3 steps. The first is why and what of design thinking. What is this different kind of paradigm, what I'm talking about? Then I'm going to talk about the inherent logic and actually the epistemology of design thinking, which is quite different from analytical thinking. And then what the consequences are and how we integrate that into course unit number 2. Now, what I always start with is why actually design thinking? Why is it actually needed? Why are we talking about it? Apart from the academic interest, there is a reason why companies and organizations out there are using design thinking a lot nowadays, and why it's becoming a hype in a way. It has all to do, and that's my personal research topic as well, is innovation. And innovation is doing something new, something non-existent, at least for some people who are involved. So it can be something new for an organization, it can be something new for a university, it can be something new for the entire world, but it has to be new and not seen before. That's one part. The second part of it is it's not just having these new ideas, it also has to be successfully implemented. This is what innovation is about, successfully implementing something new. And what we learned, and not just me, but also in the United States, in the literature on design thinking, is that actually if you take a look at innovative people and innovation processes, it looks remarkably much like how designers and architects think and work, and how makers think and work, and how artists think and work. So that's the reason why my focus from innovation came on design thinking. Now, there is something weird with making something new, and this explains why we need a different kind of paradigm, a different kind of tradition. And this, what I named, is the catch-22 of innovation. And what is the catch-22? Catch-22 is an English phrase for a situation you can't get out, you're stuck in it. In innovation, and people who are innovative and making new things, they experience the catch-22 a lot of times. The situation is as follows. When you come with something new, something like a new idea or a new product or a new service or a new way of looking at things, or it doesn't matter what it is, in order to make it, in order to produce it, in order to implement it, it is required that you can explain upfront what you will deliver in the end, how much it will cost, how much problems you may have, how much people you need, how much resources you need, what the others will do, and so on and so on and so on. And it doesn't matter whether you're a startup or a big company or you're just an artist trying to make something, you always have to say upfront what will you deliver, at what price, and what will it deliver us. Now, what's the problem? If you are really innovative, if you're doing something really new, you cannot possibly answer these questions. And if you can answer these questions, you're not doing something new. And this is the catch-22, because people who are truly innovative, they get stuck because they can't get the resources and the things for getting their project started, and those who can are not making something new. I hope this is a little bit clear. Now, the reason why design thinking is becoming so popular in business, in law, in creative businesses, and in other things is that actually designers do it differently, and they have a different kind of paradigm. Now, in order to explain a little bit what it is, I always oppose it to two other lines of thinking, and this is where the paradigms knock in a little bit. The way how I frame it right now, and this is already discussed and by some people contested, I always start with it's a kind of problem solving, and there must be a million problems in this world that we like to solve. But the funny thing is, if you take a look from it from a perspective from problem solving, there are basically three ways how we deal with problems. The first, and this is the one that is quite dominant in engineering, for instance, that's an analytical approach. And what's an analytical approach? We have a problem, find the cause of the problem. And don't do anything unless you find the cause of the problem in order to solve it. So I always make this joke, if your car doesn't start, you want to know what the problem is. So you're going to take a look at, is it the battery, or is it the petrol you don't have, or is it something else? What's the cause of the problem? Because once you found the cause of the problem, you can solve it. That's an analytical approach to problem solving. And this is, as I said, dominant, for instance, in engineering and in other sciences as well. The second way of how to solve problems, which is quite popular among management studies and organizational studies, for instance, and also in the practice of managers and politics as well, is decision making. The way how they, in a way, solve problems is much less on analysis of what causes problems, but it's much more about what are the options and how do we negotiate contesting stakes of stakeholders in order to come to a solution which is kind of okay for most people and doesn't harm too many other people. So it's choosing wisely among options. Well, the very thing they need is options. And actually in this Corona age that we're living, you can see it happening on the spot. We have to choose between a lockdown, an intelligent lockdown, no lockdown at all. How will we do with the economics? How will we do with making sure that people don't get bankrupt and stuff like that? And they are making many, many choices from the options that are available. Totally different kind of paradigm in order to deal with problems. Now, we take a look at design thinking and maker's culture. You see that they have a different way of solving problems. If you ask an architect or a designer to build you a new house, for instance, he will not ask you what exactly is the cause of the problem that you need a new house. He will also not show you a lot of different kind of housings from a catalog or whatever, options to choose from. No, what he does is he starts creating options, new options, things that you never saw before. He creates and shows it to you in order to test it, in order to solve the problem. So they come up with new things you haven't invented, and by showing it and testing it, they make sure that something is delivered in the end you will like. This is a different paradigm. Now, to be sure that and I'm always showing this slide because as a professor of design thinking, people may think that I'm just saying design thinking is the way to go. No, it's not. I'm just saying these three styles, they are different, but yet they need each other. So analysis is oriented on causes, that's always needed. Design thinking is oriented on conceiving solutions, it's always needed. And decision making is on making choices between all the options and solutions that are available. What I learned in the studies I did, if I take a look at organizations, take a look at teams, you see a lot of people inside organizations have a very analytical mindset. We have a lot of managers making decisions, but especially the design thinking, the creative part is sometimes lacking. Now, this was a little bit to explain the different styles, and why I'm saying this is there is a different kind of logic underneath the design thinking and maker's paradigm, and it's called abduction. And maybe some of you know it, but in order to explain that a little bit, I'm going to give you the most famous and briefest definition of design thinking ever made by Herbert Simon. It's already 50 years old, but for me, it all started there. He says, everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed to change an existing situation into a preferred one. So what he said was, I make it always visual. We have an existing situation, I named that the East, and there is a preferred situation, that's where we want to go. And design is all about how to get from East to Zoll. Very simple. And here's the catch. If we take a look at, for instance, at popular modules like the double diamond, as it is practiced by many today, this perfectly fits, this approach perfectly fits with double diamond. Because what they say is, we have to, I hope you're familiar with the double diamond. It consists of 4 stages: discover, define, develop, and deliver. The first, and it's all about diverging and converging, diverging, converging. Now, what you take, if you really take a look at the double diamond, and this is where I say this is a little bit the engineering analytical paradigm underneath it still, is that they have at one hand the discover and define stage, which is about what's the problematic situation today, discover, empathize, get to know what is the problem. Then you define what is needed, what's the preferred situation, and then we design how to get there. So it's from East to Zoll by means of a design. Problem is, if we take a look at design, the logic, what we see much more often, and for instance with Corona as well, or with climate change, or with smaller problems, it doesn't matter. What we see in many design things is that we have an existing situation, but we don't agree on what the preferred situation is. We do not agree, for instance, today's world, whether the harm to the economy is not too big compared to the other things which have to with the health of the elderly in this world, for instance. I'm just giving an example. So this balancing of frames and perspectives is actually that there is always a question mark. What is the preferred situation? So we have an East, the existing situation, but we don't agree on what the preferred situation is. So how to get from East to Zoll if you don't know what the preferred situation is? And this is where I say, this is where classical design thinking, like Donald Schoen is proposing it and wrote it down, like Kees Dorst is writing about it. They say you need another kind of logic, which is abductive. What you do is you have to frame the situation. You say, you know, there is a kind of thing that we like to go to, a kind of preferred situation. We frame it and then we can make a design. But the thing is, we can have different kind of frames. We can have different kind of preferred situations. And that's basically what design thinking is all about. You develop multiple frames, multiple different, this is what can be, and this is how we can get there. And why I'm showing you this is that for an artist or for an architect or a designer, this is a regular, normal way of thinking. So they create concepts, never one, always multiple. They create multiple kinds of how to deal with these concepts to make it into a deliverable. Always they have multiple options and they show it to people. Never one, always multiple. They always use multiple frames. Now the implication is a bit, there are 3 and I like to highlight them. First of all, you have to iterate. This is what design thinking is all about in maker's culture. So you have to frame, analyze, ideate, visualize, reflect, and again, and again, and again. And one of the studies I did inside a product development team, you see here a designer on the right, and I don't know if you see my pointer, but there are on his desk 1, 2, and here 3 different iterations made within 2 weeks, and all of them is completely different designs. So they iterate a lot, real designers in the world out there in the in real practice. The reason why is not just because they like it, but because what they think is the problem, what is framed as a problem, and what kind of solution they co-evolve. There is a famous paper on it. The second implication is co-creation. You cannot possibly decide what others need with design thinking. If you design a house for someone else, you cannot judge whether or not the house is fitting to his needs and whether or not it's liked. You have to involve others some way or other. So you see here some of my students who are working with clients, they always have to test their ideas multiple times, not just at the end, multiple times during the process in these iterations. You have to ask people. Actually, Marianne just gave an excellent example with course number 1 that you involved others, and probably you learned you need to change a lot. The third implication, and this is where the artifacts become so tremendously important for design thinking, you have to show and test what's on your mind. You have to show, this is the idea I'm having. On the left, there's a, how do you say, Shutterstock kind of image, how these architects do, and that's what we like to see. On the right, you see one of my researches, which I did, which is a project leader, and you see how angry he is. I was making movies of product development teams in practice, and what you can see here is that this guy, as a project leader from a project with 220 persons, discovered something which he didn't like. And how did he discover it? Because people were making artifacts, as you name them, making sketches and designs and stuff like that. You need them in order to understand what we are making. So artifacts are not the outcome of thinking, they are part of thinking, especially in teams. How, this is one of those lines I'm using a lot of times, how can we know what we want until we see what might be possible? And this is the essential paradigm for me for design thinking, and we tried to integrate that right now in course number 2, Learning by Creating. So if you take a look at course number 1, you will see the double diamond is explained. I had a little bit of a problem with that, to be very honest, because the double diamond is quite linear and analytic. But what we did for making how to do design thinking, we expanded the double diamond. And the figure that explains it best is I show over here. So you still, for those who are familiar with the double diamond, you see the same names in the same stages. Discover, define, develop, deliver. There's always a part which is named document, because you can't do anything without documenting it in the end. And there is one word here added, which is the framing part. Kees Dorst, the famous professor on design and framing innovation is his book, Frame Innovation. He's talking a lot about framing as well. It's part of the define stage, so you need multiple frames. Now, there is one very important thing I like to say. So we made this course alongside these stages, and what you can do on each of these stages in order to practice design thinking. You have to make sure that at one hand, in design thinking, the scope of the brief is broadened, and that's what we need to teach to our students as well, that it's not just one thing, not one frame. You always have to broaden the scope. It's not just what the client is asking, whatever, always broaden the scope, especially in the beginning. And during the steps you take, you deepen the knowledge and you get more and more details. That's what we put in this course, which is in development. So we have a general tab. We have principles of design thinking, which I just introduced to you. And then we have these stages like discover, develop, and deliver. And in this discover, for instance, or in frame and define, sorry, I'm skipping one, you will see stuff that I was just talking about, how to develop frames, for instance. This is what we are developing, and we expect to deliver it by the end of April. Now, I think it's time for some questions.
Thank you, Guido. We'll make room for, I think, just one question. But it's obvious that this connects a lot to what we have actually already been talking about. In a way, a lot of the more skills, in a way, the skills-oriented learning that Jasmina also talked about is actually like fertilizing for this more expanded design thinking to go on also in our in our curricula and in our teaching. Do we have a question? We have a comment from Sarah who says that she would recommend Catherine Lynch's TEDx talk, Engineers Go Wild, to follow up on your talk, Guido.
What was it? Sorry, I didn't understand yet because someone's knocking on my door right now. So go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I think we should maybe sort of save the discussion on skills and design phases in design thinking for our final discussion, and invite Ricky, who's also actually, she's doing educational design thinking. And today she's going to talk to us about what can we learn from using game jams in higher education, perspectives from teachers, students, and professionals. So again, going 360-degree around and testing. So Ricky?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Great. And I'm a bit mindful of the time. I'll try to, keep within the 10 minutes frame. Otherwise, please just stop me, Marianne. Yeah, so I'll talk you about the course module we've been developing on gameplay design. And I'm Rikke Toft Nørgaard from Aarhus University. I'm an associate professor in education design and technology. And I've been practicing, developing, and researching design thinking and making in the higher educations since 2013. And with a specific kind of focus on game design and game jams in higher education since 2015. Give or take. And today I'll share with you how game jams in higher education can be kind of practiced as academia, and working, and how we can bring students across the arts and sciences together to work and learn together within higher education, but also in the industry and with public and creative organizations. So I'll just share the slides with you. Yeah. So first of all, a very short note on what is a game jam. So a game jam is a composite word between games and jam sessions as you have in music, where kind of people come together and jam together without much or little prior preparation to develop new material or simply to practice. So this is really important when you think about higher education, and to prototype experimental ideas into playable games when we talk about game jams. So these two notions are really important when we talk about how to make sense, or how to use game jams or game design or a lot of other new practices in a meaningful way in higher education without it being detrimental to academia. And then it's within a short time frame we talk about game jams, and which is also very important, the last part here, the results are shared publicly. So some of the differences between game jams in general and academic game jams, as we've been working with, is to have a really attentive eye to the critical thinking processes, the theoretical and conceptual way of working within a game jam, and so forth. So there's this a concept of thoughtful objects, or objects to think with, which is kind of the pinnacle of the games that then come out of academic game jams. It's a way for students to externalize their design ideas through making prototypes, which serves as manifestations of their understanding. So it's a way of materializing thinking in higher education. And we've been working with this through gameful design-based research, we call it. And the focus is really on critical reflection, collaboration, try to invite for a bit more risk-taking, and this kind of prospective orientation that is also kind of in the center of design thinking, as we heard in the last presentation. Some examples of, we have practiced teaching through academic game jams. So sometimes, and normally a game jam will be 24 to 48 hours, and sometimes we don't have the time for that in academia. So we kind of been experimented with kind of game jams, academic game jams that last for just within a lesson, but also for kind of an entire course. And these are kind of some of the formats we've been working at. Everything from kind of tangible game jams, live role-playing a game jam, so students enacting the controller, the avatar, the game mechanics, being the narrator of the game engine and so forth, which was very uncomfortable, especially to kind of computer science students. Gaming at the edge, so how far can we take games as a concept when we imply strange theories to them? Rethinking VR, which was a 4-week course, like how do we actually make VR games or game concept that makes sense rather than being kind of hyperbole, hype cycle applications. 3 very short examples. So one was one result that came out of this was students working with dancers comedy and created this layered game called Into the Eternal Darkness. So trying to work through a literary masterpiece and using that to create a very new way of having a game. Another example was from archaeology, where you actually had sand and sandboxes, and you kind of digged your way down in the sandbox and digging your way into Aarhus, and then trying to have this kind of very tangible relation to the field of archaeology. A third one was Pick a Baby, working with kind of the trolley problem, which the players didn't know before in the end, so they had to kind of Tinder Pick a Baby, and that was a way of kind of materializing their sometimes silent prejudices about disabilities, color, sex, and so forth. So they kind of got a score in the end, how many disabled babies they have kind of not picked or colored, or babies looking in a certain way, and they were just thinking they should kind of pick their future baby, and suddenly the prejudices became very visible. I'll run through this very quickly. You'll get the slides afterwards. I'm just mindful of the time, and I want to get to some of the results in the end, but we work within a very kind of specific process in academic game jams, kind of going through the double diamond process that Guido just talked about, but with a kind of a very attentive eyes towards a scholarly outcome and a designerly outcome of each of these phases. So in the first phase, we discover and ideate. There's brainstorms around the revealed theme, which can be, I don't know, friendship, disciplinary games, or whatever. And there they have to think with theory through tinkering, and they have to tinker with materials and technology as a form of academic thinking. In the next phase, they take that kind of discovery of possibilities and try to start sketching the academic game concept. They have to go before a kind of a review board, which is the teachers, and there they have to argue for why they want to make this game using theory or concepts within disciplines or across disciplines, from philosophy or whatever. And then they also have to argue for the how of the game with game design, showing some sort of sketch or game mechanics that does something new or make you feel in a new way or whatever. Then they go into kind of the develop or iterate phase, which they really work through time and time again, as we also talked about, to fine-tune the why, or the scholarly outcome, the academic argument, and iterate the game design to fine-tune the how, the game mechanics. How does this actually create a memorable, innovative, expressive game experience, whatever they're kind of going through for. And in the last phase, they then deliver and demonstrate their knowledge and their game designs through kind of academic knowledge in the form of an academic performance, academic posters and presentations, and the knowledge in form of game design through kind of giving a short pitch in the form of a video pitch or whatever, and having those playable prototypes for the audience to try out. So from each phase of these double diamond, there's a very specific scholarly outcome to be gained and a very specific designerly outcome. And these kind of go together to create this, as we talked about in the beginning, this object to think with. And it's an object that also in itself, as a game concept, should have something at heart and something it wants to communicate with an audience through game mechanics and a gameplay experience. For students, when we look at their evaluations from 2013 to 2018, we can also see something else at stake. So they often in their course evaluation talk about this being a way for them to express creativity through kind of academic interpretation. It's a way to gain more courage to fail, because it's messy and often it's very, very time constricted, so they know they can't really do well, so it's okay to mess up. It's a curiosity to experiment and explore, because they have to make all these different prototypes, get all these different kinds of ideas, and we often ask them to do something really strange. Autonomy of effort, because they're in a group and we don't really care about the individual student, we care about the group, so they can kind of kick back and relax or move in and take charge wherever they kind of feel like it. And then there's also this caring, both for the group, but also caring for a specific context, like the public library, an art museum, a certain kind of community, an industry partner, or so forth. And then Bildung, or the Danish word dannelse, which is really about becoming, like discovering through these kind of processes of thinking and making what they actually want to become, both as kind of in academia and in work life, but especially as a human being in the world. So this is the course we're developing at the moment. On the last slide here is also some more inspiration if you are interested in jamming in higher education, that I'm sure will be shared in some way or another. Yes, so, and you can find me here, and I actually did it in 10 minutes. I know I talked really fast, but I don't want to take up people's time, so it was like a really, panic, fire everywhere.
No, that was totally fabulous, and I think also in a way you kind of brought it full circle back to some of the challenges put to the curricula by Jasmina in the first talk. So I think I would just invite our 4 speakers for a comment, which would be to the question of how will this change higher education? If we acknowledge, yes, this is sort of the skills needed for all our students, not just for the humanities students. So how will this change? What will higher education for the 20th century be if we have our way? Ricky, you can start.
Yeah, I can start, because otherwise I'll talk too long probably. One thing is the thing that Guido talked about with the multiple frames. So for example, in the game design thing, you have a game exhibition, every group have a game design. They're really, really different, even though they kind of work within the same context, and that kind of opens up their mind towards a lot of different ways of approaching something they might think was a bit more narrow or set in stone somehow. The other thing is the co-creation part, that also was a question. So they co-create with a public partner, but they also co-create across the disciplines, and that's what, at least at the university I'm at, which is very disciplinary. So in groups we have people from religion, English literature, engineering, computer science, working and exploring this together, and they really, really like it because they can do stuff together that they can't do on their own. And so Dante's comedy, you can see that from literature, Pick a Baby, someone from philosophy, but they couldn't make this thing without each other, and they really get kind of excited about that.
Thank you. Susan, I wonder whether I could ask you for a comment on the same, and maybe also include a comment from the chat that says, how does this connect to the research interest in the digital humanities? And that's your sort of expert field.
Thank you. So actually, I was going to make a comment on what Ricky said, but it fits perfectly with the digital humanities question. And I really liked a phrase, and I think we've used it or reused it, that you're creating objects to think with. And I really like that, because I think that is what what we're calling maker culture. And I think that's what digital humanists feel they do. We do feel that we think and that we theorize and that we make. And these objects are a modality for us to do that. And as I said in my talk, that I would love to see what we do, if I can use this word, elevated to the same stratosphere as, discourse-based, long-form, text-based, syntactic, etc. arguments. And so one of the things that we're always, if I can use this word, fighting against, and maybe that's the question that came up at that you've just raised, Marianne, what would education look like? And it isn't just talking and writing, but making and using objects to think with and through problems that we have, coming up with solutions.
Yeah, and what you pointed to in your talk also, that language and text and rhetoric is also like processual and are also objects.
Very much so.
Yeah, not just products of thinking, but objects for thinking.
And yeah, we actually tried to take it a step further, and I think that ties, and then I'll shut up, that ties very perfectly to what you talked about, Susan. So there's objects to think with, but then in the exhibitions and the performance part that Guido also talked about, it's also objects to talk about something with. Like it's objects that talk, but it's also objects that are almost kind of academic conversational agents or objects in themselves.
Yeah, they are.
Can I add something here as well?
Yes, please.
What I like is objects to think with. They make us think in a way. It becomes really interesting when we're talking about groups of people, collective intelligence. So in a way, as well in design thinking, it's always what I say, N-1 thinking, one person thinking, making things and stuff like that. It becomes genuinely interesting when we're talking about interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary research, because then you need stuff that enable collective thinking. And words, to be honest, language is an excellent means to express what's known already, but it's very hard to explain things which is unknown, which is still to be discovered. And that's the reason why I think maker's culture and design thinking and making things is so important for transdisciplinary research as well.
Oh, try a good poem.
A poem is
an object to think.
Yes. Well, the thing is, I really like your comment, because there is expressive quality to a poem, and then you acknowledge expressive qualities of something like that, and that's now we're talking about aesthetics and stuff like that. And indeed, words is a great way of using for collective thinking, but there are many more ways, and that's so. I would say we open up a box of possibilities.
I would also actually turn it the other way around. There's also a lot for design thinking to be learned from academic ways of going about stuff. So I think when we see it most powerfully expressed when we work with it is when language or literature or whatever we call it, communication and making comes together, so to speak. So we always kind of stress the point that they have to have an academic argument and a design argument, and the design argument has to be experienced. It's interactive if it's a game, at least has to be experienced and understood, and the academic argument as well, and those two together make a compelling argument which is about something new. So that kind of expressivity, perhaps if you go full circle and think about your first question, we also perhaps need a bit more expressivity in the university and higher education. Like poems, we are seldomly kind of inviting students to be poetic when they write their exam papers, and this is well at some fields at least. If it's philosophy or archaeology, you need to be descriptive, you need to be analytic, as you talked about, Guido. And I think what we see when we use design thinking or new formats for digital humanities, there's this kind of not set in stone space that is not kind of sedimented yet, and there's an opening up towards letting expressivity come to life in those fields. So it's also an opportunity for higher education in that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would like to open to Jasmina actually for like a final comment to get full circle, because I think one of the really interesting things you pointed to in your great talk was sort of how to go about the cultural competences. And I think maybe this, you know, the design approach where you do a lot of different solutions, or actually opens up to another way of approaching the cultural competences.
Well, thank you. I don't know, I was really stressed about this time line, you know, that I have to fit in 10 minutes. So I'm really looking forward for some workshop that is going to be, I don't know, million hours, where we can really discuss this for days. And so I was really trying to say this in short, but basically, you know, in this other project that I was not presenting here, that we did with the Opera House, we actually tested the borders, you know, on one institution that is completely, let's say, digital and offline, looking offline, with another institution that is completely physical. And there the disciplines clashes, you know, and there are many challenges. And you have, for example, completely international dancing company, you know, and how you really fit there. So we deployed a collaborative creative art project, you know, to fit somehow all these making culture ideologies and cultural sensitivities. And then I realized that there are many, you know, below the carpet, many things, and that we have really to be open-minded. And in that sense, I think that if it goes our way, you know, the education is going to be changed really up to high extent, because this, what is done in traditional universities, you know, it's somehow tight. We all see it doesn't fit. And I think that basically, to call them our users, the students are going to show us the way, because they will go for more of this that you are doing, Rikke, Marianne, and Suzanne, you know, Guido, because they respond to it in a more positive way. You can see that when you compare to only academic achievement, how you write, you know, and do, and how to say, recreate the knowledge again, it's not on the same level of plausibility. You know, people here are really caught by this. They call you and say, you know, we were so proud to be part of this. We would like to continue this. And it's also changing the dancers and the opera itself, because opera, it was such a difficult thing for them to imagine, what do we do now? What do we do with all this digital? So I think this is a new space to explore all these things and put things together. I mean, I have a feeling like all of you are, you know, hosted in much more open-minded places and universities. I see your courses, you know, I come from a very traditional way of thinking, and I find my environment not so welcoming for this. So I'm the one who's pushing for these things. But I think that basically, you know, once we start cooperating more, we're actually going to create more and more space and understanding that actually this is what is needed. This is the only way I think that 21st century skills could be learned and introduced.
Yeah, so that would be a collective process as well.
Yeah.
That we are now inviting each other to join, and also our audience today. I think looking at our time, I would like to thank our 4 speakers very much. It was great and it was engaging, and I think it's hopeful, and also pointing, you know, from the present moment into a new normal, where we will provide a lot of change, both for the higher education, but also for our students to impact our societies and the world as at large. I think, you know, also I know Rikke is famously quoted for saying, "To me, design thinking is like a dance." So I think that would be a great thing to make our sort of finishing words today. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
sharing
Thank you
with
so much
us.
for inviting us.
Thank you for inviting us. Bye.
Bye.
And
Thank
thank you
you.
to the audience for all the nice questions as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
dear
you.
panelists. Thank you, dear attendees. And please, before we finish with our session, let me point you out to our next sessions, to a third iteration, which is gonna be next week. I hope you can see my colorful slide right now. We will welcome Evelyn Wandelfrogt from the Austrian Academy of Sciences, Ludovic Labit from the Thomas Betta University, Florian Bettel from the University of Applied Arts, and Akshata Bhatt from the Demp College of Arts and Science in India. So if you enjoyed this session, please join next time as well. We will be discussing various topics next week, 22nd of April, starting at 4 p.m. Central East Time. Thank you, everybody, for your time, for joining this session, and I hope we will see each other next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Anna, for hosting us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.